Radio Fips live with Bobby Blitz from Overkill on the telephone. Hi Bobby, how are you doing?
How are you, Andreas?
Oh, I'm perfectly fine. I hope it's fine with you as well. So where are you calling from at the moment?
I'm in New Jersey in my home, actually in my office. This is the command central for the electric gauge promotion. So doing a lot of interviews. This is also where I recorded the vocal demos. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a special place for me. It's all full of Overkill paraphernalia and skull crusher paraphernalia, and really cool.
Of course, the big topic is the upcoming new album, Electric Age. Before we talk about this, I would like to ask you one little question about the previous album, Ironbound, because, many fans and also the press regarded this as kind of, a return album. So it was extremely popular, the fans liked it, the press liked it, and it was a huge success for you. Do you have any idea why especially this album was, so much more popular with everyone than the albums before?
Well, I think, first of all, it was a good cohesive record. I think that you always go into the studio to try to achieve such results. But there's many different aspects that affect the record and how that record's perceived. And I think the biggest aspect is timing. The scene right now is very healthy. The Ironbound record reflected that of the scene. Therefore, the scene wanted the record. So I think that timing worked very well. Someone had asked me how do you think that this was the best record? I said, I think if it was 1997, that this record could have been overlooked. So I really think timing is a big part of it. And I also think that there's a great chemistry in the band. So everything seems to be working, and let's say it's the right time to exploit that chemistry based on the scene's healthiness.
As you just mentioned, so right time to exploit this energy. So did you somehow try to, let's call it just copy the recipe for success with the Ironbound album for the Electric Age album? So did you try to stick to some things that you did with Ironbound so that you said, well, let's just do it the same because it worked so well?
No, we didn't, and because that's not fun. And this has to be fun first and foremost. If the chemistry is correct, that's what we're exploiting, not necessarily the process or the result of that process. We're trying to get results through a different process from record to record, and obviously high results. We're trying to get high-end results. But to sit down and try to copy it would be wrong, because then I think it would be more about Ironbound than about the Electric Age. And there are marketable differences between the two. Sure, some similarities, but that's based on the time and the chemistry being relatively the same between the band members. But I think that the Electric Age has more of an aggressive type energy to it. It has a bigger production, for instance. And not to lessen one to the other, but to say, hey, thank God they're two different records with two different personalities, because that's what's fun about doing this.
So now what were the main or the important differences in whatever songwriting or recording or whatever? What was different in the making, let's call it that way?
Well, one of the things that we did, for almost a 10-year period, we've been using Dee Dee's studio. So let's say roughly 5 records. We're taking more time to do records. And when you take more time to do records, I think if we were a younger band, this would be a problem. We would start overthinking it. But I think that with our experience, it helps to have more time. And what we do is not just take more time and spend more time in the studio. Probably the studio time is the same with regard to recording and performance. But we're dotting in the center of those performances. We're putting in live shows. We're going to do a festival. We're going away for a weekend, or we're going away for a week, or we went, for instance, did a South American tour. This is all right in the middle of the recording process. And I think that becomes the X factor. Because if I'm standing on a stage in Lima, Peru on a Tuesday, and the following Monday I'm in the studio cutting vocals, it brings the live into the studio. And I think that using the time that way has really helped us with this last record. And it's the most we've ever done it in our history with regard to doing live shows during the recording process.
Oh, that's interesting. So before the interview, I watched the YouTube behind the scenes video, and in the video where you are talking about the new album, you said that, one important factor for the album is old school. So what does that mean to you, old school? Because old school can be many different things. What is it especially for you?
I think my definition of it would be personal. And when I say old school and I'm referring to Overkill, I'm really referring to our principles and our values. I mean, this was not necessarily founded on granite. It was founded on chaos. And no one knew what was going on at that particular time. I mean, you could talk to people that were in the scene on the West Coast. They didn't know what they were creating. It was just happening. And I think that in time, what happened is that we started understanding the importance of it. And whenever I think of old school, I think of our old school principle, meaning that we're doing this because we love it. It means a lot to us. If we get respect from the scene, it's because we've shown the scene respect. So I think that's a trade-off. So when I talk old school, I say that. But I always want to have that old school principle presented with contemporary value, modern production, et cetera, et cetera. I want Overkill to always be valuable in the day, not necessarily in its past.
As far as I remember, I guess you finished recording the album somewhere around December. Is this correct?
Greg really started mixing it in December, but I went back in and changed vocals, I think, right up until the delivery date. We delivered on the 17th of January, a mixed product, but I think the last vocals I did were somewhere around the 12th because I just didn't like them. And again, this is that luxury of time. That's that. I can just jump right down to Dee Dee's and I can redo this. This would have been my question. So how do you finish? Or did you finish this record? So did you just say, okay, now that's it, or did you have a certain schedule where you said, okay, we can work until this and that date, and then it has to be finished? But you just said, well, you had the chance to change vocals. Were there also some other changes, guitar, bass, or whatever? No, this was, the process we use is that it starts with Dee Dee and it ends with me. So he's the beginning, I'm the end. What happens between the beginning and the end is development, and that's where all the other guys put in their 2 cents. The song gets developed. We use that word exploitation again. Exploit their talents. Ron running away with it on the drums. Dave's insight into guitars to make songs better and better, in my opinion. But all the way to the end, I have the opportunity then to change something if I feel it'll make it better. And that's what I did. I mean, so I'll use all the way up to that last moment. Now, we have to have a delivery date because a delivery date, you count backwards from a release date to what the delivery date is. And we've made some kind of plans for touring, etc. So I use that as my cutoff point, that delivery date. So that's our process pretty much. And it's not so different from what we've done in the past, except that we're learning to use it right until the end, if we feel it'll make it better.
It is a little bit unusual for a bass player to be the main riff producer. I don't really know about this, but I guess Dee Dee also does some guitar playing, or does he come up with the riffs actually on the bass guitar? Do you know this?
He does write riffs on the guitar. And he's actually, even in his side projects, he plays the guitar on his side projects, the Bronx Casket Company. That's what he records with. So he's always been playing guitar, as long as I can remember anyway. So there's never a riff necessarily written on the bass. You have to think in terms of riffs, too. A lot of times riffs don't happen just because you have a guitar in your hand. A riff can happen in your head.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's really the ones that are the special ones, when it just comes out of nowhere or you're thinking about it and it develops. And then you transfer that thought to the guitar. And I think that they're really the special ones, and he's always prepared for those. He's always with a recording device, whether he's humming into that recording device in his car or on a tour bus, or, I've been walked into sound checks, whether it be in Germany or Japan or the U.S., and there's Dee Dee with a recording device kneeling down trying to get a riff on tape at the sound check. So he just never lets it go by, and I think that's quite an advantage. So.
And what about you? So writing the lyrics, do you also have a lot of lyrics at the back of your head or somewhere in a drawer, or do you come up with everything completely new for a new record?
Well, I think that there's a fine line between repetition and style, and I try to lean toward what's style. I think that I obviously can recognize my lyrics because of the style I write in, but I don't like to repeat myself. So I don't necessarily keep around old ideas. I walk around with a pad, and I'm always jotting notes. And those notes can be anything from a thought to a rhyme. And what I do in my office that I told you I'm speaking to you from is I put signs everywhere that says, "Don't repeat yourself." And I think that this actually helps me to come up with something fresh, because now I'm competing against myself to, let's say, outdo what I've done in the past or from the prior record, but with doing it with a fresh idea with a similar style.
What I was thinking about when I was listening to old Overkill stuff before I got the new record, I was thinking, have they ever thought about writing some kind of, well, let's just call it a doom song, like Skull Crusher or stuff like that ever again? Because, it has been a while since there was such a, unusual Overkill song.
Yeah, I probably, we've messed around with it since Skull Crusher. I mean, there was a song Horoscope that followed that, and Spiritual Void, which was on I Hear Black. I think it has to be correct. It's not anything we sit down and think about. One of the beauties, I think, of this band is that it's action versus reaction. There's not a hell of a lot of thinking that goes into it. Sure, you have to think the riff, and sure, you have to assemble the song and think the lyric. But I remember sitting with Dee Dee, months ago, before we started demoing this, and we were having a cup of coffee. We were on the road, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "About?" I said, "The new record." He goes, "Well, we're not going to reinvent the fucking wheel, are we?" I said, "No, you're probably right." And I think that's the idea. That was the entire talk we had about the direction of the record before the record.
Well, it brings it to the point.
Right, but that's kind of cool because it works for us. And then you really get... you got to get an emotional explosion from Overkill for where they are emotionally. And we talked about chemistry earlier. That chemistry is of a high level, and that emotional explosion is of a high level. So you get this kind of pure, honest representation of what we're about from each time, instead of a contrived, manufactured representation of us.
Now, when you write songs for the new record, for the other records, do you sometimes come up with ideas where you think, "Oh, hey, it sounds really cool, it sounds great, but it just somehow does not sound like Overkill, so we're not going to use it"? Does that happen?
I not usually. Usually, what happens is that those riffs, to some degree, even if they're different, will wear the Overkill banner by the end of its development. And I think that's always kind of cool. We were a cover band when we started, and when we would choose a cover, by the end of the day, that cover sounded like us playing it, not like the band that wrote it. And I think that that's kind of the cool thing about developing riffs and developing songs. Now, obviously, if somebody brings something in on a harp, we're not going to be able to turn that necessarily into Overkill. But if it's a guitar riff, we probably can. And I think that that's kind of cool, is being able to put your stamp on it as it develops.
I would like to talk a little bit about, Overkill's live performances, and, one of the, central points of Overkill's live performances is, of course, you and your action on stage, and especially your physical fitness, really impressive physical fitness. So I always ask myself, how much training does this man do, or does this all just come from being on stage and moving on stage, or do you also go to the gym or go jogging training or some kind of fitness training, whatever?
Well, Andres, there's a balance for me. I'm predisposed to being a very thin person first and foremost. Doing this, I've done 4,000 shows. We're talking about a lot of experience out there. I remember talking to Philip from Gamma Bomb, and he told me, he goes, "How do you do that night after night?" I said, we'll talk after the show. And then we talked after the show, and he said, "Well, what did you want to tell me?" I said, "Did you like it?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Steal the good stuff, man." I said, "I didn't invent this shit." But, with regard to physical fitness, I got a wonderful dog that comes down at 5 o'clock and wants me to take her for a run. I have a little gym in the other room. But I think primarily it comes from what happens on the stage. I think it's just, that's where I build up the stamina. If you do that 4,000 times, you're obviously trained. So it's the same as a voice. It's a muscle, and I think of it as a muscle, and I say, well, if I treat it correctly, it'll be good. But I'm not Mr. Perfect. I just put out a Marlboro and I put it out in a beer can. So I still enjoy my life. I don't take it to extremes. I just try to eat well and try to keep things in balance.
I guess the fun definitely is important for this one. Now, often if you read Overkill live reviews, people write, there has never been one bad Overkill show. You just mentioned it's something like 4,000 shows. Now, do you remember one bad show? Can you tell us, quickly, what happened in one show that you really think was bad?
Well, there's obviously been bad shows. And usually those bad shows are out of your control. It's usually when it has something to do with production, PAs going down, having to stop the show because of a power failure, something like so. But it doesn't mean that we won't come back after that and then try to make it right. One of the things that I've always felt or been most proud of is that, for all this time that Overkill's played, I've felt like I've never taken anyone's money under false pretense to say, I just don't feel good tonight. It doesn't matter. If there's 4,000 shows, of course I'm not going to feel good some nights. But what's more important than that is the show. And that, to me, is something that I'm proud about. It means that I obviously respect the fact that I can stand on that stage. I don't take it for granted. I'm still nervous.
Really?
Many years, this many shows, my stomach will turn upside down before a show. And 5 minutes later, I'm fine. But beforehand, I'm jumping up and down, and my stomach is upside down, and I feel like I'm going to puke. That's why maybe it works for me. That it's not just, whatever, it's another show. I always think my biggest show is the one I'm doing right now. Whatever one I'm doing now, that's the most important one.
I would like to use the last couple of minutes to talk a little bit about the past of Overkill. Let's go to your very beginnings as a singer. What were your first attempts as a singer, or especially, as the singer in a band? Because, of course, many people start singing at home. But what was the first time that you sang in a band?
It was, I was in high school. I was the bass player in a band called Tempest Fugit. And the guitar player did all the singing. And then another guitar player brought an idea down, and it was a cover band. And he wanted to do Lou Reed's Sweet Jane. And the guitar player, the singing guitar player wouldn't sing it. So I just grabbed the mic and I started singing.
Yeah, great.
So that was my first experience singing. And I obviously enjoyed it because I did sing at home with my mother's family is a, big singing kind of an Irish family. So it was just natural for me to be able to open my mouth and have something come out that sounded relatively good.
Now, Overkill has been around for more than 30 years. So has there ever been a point in the career where you actually thought about quitting, where you thought, maybe I'm not quite sure if it's a good idea to go on, maybe we should call it a day, or has there never been thoughts like this?
There's never been a thought like that. There's been times when I thought I was going to be forced to, but not by my own hand, if that makes sense. It would never have been my decision to stop. It might have been a situation where there was a medical condition that was just not going to allow me to do this anymore because I just wouldn't be able to sing. I just wouldn't have a voice anymore. So it was, having that, as a possibility was really kind of unsettling for me, because I always thought that regardless of what the circumstances were, that this band first and foremost always enjoyed what they did. It wasn't about necessarily popularity, or wasn't about where we stood in the pecking order. It was about that we had the chance to do it and we had the opportunity. And I think that that's a really pure way of looking at it, so that if that's your values, you don't want to stop. You found your spot in life. So I've never thought in those terms, and we've never had the discussions of maybe we should call it a day. But we have had the discussions, Dee Dee and myself, when I had some medical issues that, what are we going to do? No. What are we going to do now?
Dee Dee and you have been together playing in Overkill for more than 30 years, as I just said. And also the rest of the band seems to be a huge unity, one good community. But is it sometimes also important for you to get away from this? Because I think especially on tour, we're together kind of 24 hours, 7 days a week. And is it also sometimes important for you to completely get away from Overkill, or do you also in your free time spend time together with Dee Dee and the other guys from the band?
I see the guys when we record and we tour and rehearse. That's it. Occasionally a wedding here and there, or occasionally a party where we have mutual friends, but we don't go to ball games together or anything like so. Now, Dee Dee and I obviously manage the band, so I'm in touch with Dee Dee on a daily basis. We talk at least 4 or 5 times a week. So that's the business end of it. But when it comes to socializing, I think that there's a great balance that we have. And I think that that's what keeps the chemistry high. We're not up each other's asses. We're out living our own lives. These guys have kids and wives. I have a wife. Dee Dee has kids and a wife. It's good to have a balance, because when we go out, we're really ready. I mean, we're really ready to go. My wife said to me last night, she goes, "You're a pain in the ass lately." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You want to go on the road, don't you?" I said, "It's only about a month away, so I'm starting to feel like I should be gone."
Now, looking back on your first albums, many people, or some people still, of course, think that this happens to all the bands that have been around for quite a while, that the first albums were the best. The first ones are the big classics, like Years of Decay is the best Overkill album, and everything was better with Bobby Gustafson on guitar. So does this annoy you, or, do you just accept it because, that's just the way it is?
Yeah, I just accept it, and to be annoyed with it would be wrong. I mean, to have the opportunity to affect somebody's life with regard to something that I love doing or we love doing is always positive and always a compliment. From a personal perspective, I again like to be known for the day as opposed to the past. I always think there's more value in the day because it's current. I don't think this has ever been a band that has said, "Boy, weren't we great?" And because of that, we're gonna celebrate our past. We've never done that. I mean, love us or hate us, or love or hate the release, we've always come out with big fucking sharp teeth and clenched fists, and there's something to be said for that. And sure, hey, if somebody likes Years of Decay, hey, good for them. If that's where they found the pinnacle of what we've done, good for them. At least they found it. But I still concentrate on the day.
Do you still remember? I guess you remember the first bands or records or songs that turned you into a metalhead, that infected you with a heavy metal virus. What was the initial trigger for you to become a metalhead?
It's funny because I just wrote a column for a site called Noise Creep. It's through AOL. And they had asked me about the 5 most influential records in my life. And one of them I put down, and I think that this is a turning point for me, was Sad Wings of Destiny. I'd heard Rock-a-Rolla, and it was okay. It was good. But this was like a riff monster. And I think I wrote in the column, I said, I felt like it turned everything in the room into leather and steel. And then I put the record on as a mere mortal, but by the time it was done, I was a headbanging god. And I think that that's probably the record that, with regard to metal, that got me really headbanging.
I completely agree with you. I guess Sad Wings of Destiny actually was the beginning of, well, of course, Black Sabbath was first, but what we think of, well, classical heavy metal, it's more Judas Priest. Hey, great choice. We're finally coming to the end of the interview. The last thing I always ask my interview partners is to help me pick some songs for my show. So just imagine turning on the radio and listen to a metal show. You can pick 3 songs that you would just enjoy listening to. It can be something very old, something new, some hard rock, some death metal, whatever. It just should not be something from your own band. So 3 songs for the show.
Well, why don't we do Victim of Changes from Sad Wings? Mm-hmm. I've recently been listening to the Rainbow Anthology, which I think is fantastic. And I try to stay away from metal when we're writing. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I was just attracted to this through the whole writing process. So I would pick Mistreated. And let's see, the third one, I'd like to hear Bonded by Blood by Exodus, please.
Great pick. Really glad to have the chance of talking to you. And I wish you all the best for the future. I guess the next chance I will be seeing Overkill will be in Wacken. When you're going to play there, and really looking forward to this one. And so, all the best for the future, big success for the record, and maybe we can meet in person one day. Hopefully we'll have an interview when the next Overkill record will come out.
Sounds good, my friend. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right, thank you very much, and see you next time around. Thanks, Bobby. Bye.
Bye, Andres.